With its horseshoe shape and massive Sector 1 straight, the Australian Grand Prix has become one of the most popular fixtures in the history of Formula 1, providing many opportunities for drivers to overtake. So it goes without saying that the previous race was a pretty intense one, resulting in a number of highlights you would have been disappointed to miss out on. If you did find yourself unable to catch the broadcast, don't stress. We've compiled a list of some of the best highlights from the F1 racing in Austria. So whether you're a Formula 1 fanatic or just want to catch up on everything that is happening in the world of motorsports today, you've come to the right place, as we're about to explore everything there is to know about the previous race of the current F1 championship. But before we get into it, make sure to leave a like and subscribe with notifications on so you don't miss any of the new videos we post. Number 1. The domination of Max Verstappen. It was an incredible weekend for Max Verstappen in Austria, with the leading driver for Red Bull doing his best to secure a couple of record-breaking times in free practice, which allowed him to take pole position during qualifying with absolutely nobody else in sight. Starting in the best place possible on race day, the championship leader made sure that he didn't blink before the starting light turned green, having one of his best starts of the season. Safely in first position for the entirety of the race, Verstappen even went on to take that extra point that was up for grabs by setting the fastest lap of the Austrian Grand Prix, ensuring that his time on the podium was celebrated by everyone back home in the Netherlands. Speaking of, the Dutch driver was actually complimented overwhelmingly in the post-race interviews with the commentating crew, who went on to inform him that his win had actually granted him another record to add to his name. As it turns out, this win makes him the youngest Formula 1 driver to ever have achieved the feat of 50 podiums in F1 history. Suffice it to say, Max was stoked and stays humble by mentioning that the race was actually a pretty difficult one for him. Strange considering he was not once in the trouble of being overtaken. Verstappen also went on to mention that since there is a 2-week break until the racing at Silverstone is set to kick off, the team is going to be training hard to make sure that the momentum from the win is not lost. Since he is currently leading the Formula 1 driving standings, he can't afford to let things slip right now, especially since that would be his first championship win ever. And we don't think there is a single Formula 1 supporter out there who doesn't believe that Max 100% deserves to take the championship from Hamilton this time around. But with the massive support that the English driver seems to be getting from the stewards and race director, can Vettel actually pull this off? We hope so. Number 2. The volatile shifting of Fernando Alonso. After having a blistering start from the grid, two-time world champion Fernando Alonso found himself in some trouble as the laps remained counted down. The Alpine driver put the pedal to the metal and found himself in a position to take one, maybe even two places upon reaching turn 1. Glancing at the space made available down the side of Charles Leclerc, Alonso pounced, but unfortunately for him, Daniel Ricciardo had a similar plan in mind, as Leclerc found himself being boxed in with Ricciardo on his outside and Alonso coming up on his inside. He decided to squeeze Alonso out, allowing Ricciardo to essentially maintain his position. It was a great move though, and would most certainly have worked if it wasn't for Ricciardo causing trouble on the outside of Leclerc. In fact, we doubt Leclerc has seen Alonso on his inside. There was a pandemonium on the track after all, and Leclerc can't always be said to be the most observant of drivers. Like the former champion that he is, Alonso went on to recover from this little setback, setting up a brilliant duel between himself and George Russell for 10th position. This battle was a long and hard one, lasting until the final corner of the race, but in the end Alonso had the speed to deny the Williams driver his first set of F1 points for the team. For those of you who don't know, Fernando has this strange superstition of having to walk the upcoming track on the Thursday before free practice whenever he finds himself winning points at the last. So, if you want to catch him at Silverstone, you know exactly where he will be. And when he is asked in the post-race interview what he learned from the race, Alonso said jokingly that even two-time world champions have a lot to learn, such as how to take the inside in time. But let's hope that he doesn't hesitate at the British Grand Prix. Number 3. Lando Norris finds himself in some trouble. When it comes to the McLaren team, Lando Norris has most certainly been the driver of the year, outperforming his fellow teammate Daniel Ricciardo by a pretty large margin. The young driver has ended up lapping Ricciardo back to Monaco, where he found himself on the podium, so it goes without saying that McLaren fans have certainly been keeping an eye on the Belgium driver. That being said, Norris found himself in some pretty hot water when the race stewards, after forcing Sergio Perez off the track at turn 4, more. For this little stunt of his, Lando was assigned a grand total of 2 points on his license, which means that he is only 2 penalty points away from a suspension. Luckily for him though, 2 penalty points will be lost before racing starts at Silverstone, which as we mentioned earlier is 2 weeks away from race day. Remember, he earned another 2 points back in Styria last season for ignoring yellow flags during free practice 1, but these are the 2 that will disappear shortly. Thank goodness. Did Lando actually deserve the penalty though? Well, if Red Bull's team boss Christian Horner is to be believed, the sanction was incredibly harsh. As we mentioned earlier, there was absolute pandemonium on the track, and Norris didn't really have anywhere else to go. Unfortunately for Perez, this didn't end up in resulting with him being pushed off the track though. And for this action, Norris was not only awarded 2 penalty points on his license, but a full 5-second penalty, which he overcame to secure the position of 3rd at the end of the day. Quite a great performance considering everything. Number 4, the growth of the driver standings deficit. Unfortunately for defending champion Hamilton, things weren't that great at the Austrian Grand Prix, and this by no means is a Mercedes problem, with teammate Bottas being able to secure himself a finish in the 2nd position overall. Hamilton, on the other hand, found himself missing out on the podium due to an impressive drive of Lando Norris, eventually finishing the race in 4th position. This means that after the Austrian Grand Prix, there was a 32-point gap between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton, which is surprisingly the largest deficit that Hamilton has ever had to face in the turbo hybrid era. And with team leader Toto Wolff having already announced that the team has turned its attention towards 2022, it looks like Mercedes is going to continue to give the Brits some trouble in the upcoming races. But considering how the majority of fans don't like him due to the fact that he has thrown some tantrums in his time, it goes without saying that not many of us are feeling too sorry for him. Besides, this would be Max Verstappen's first World Championship win, so no wonder the majority of the support is going his way. But with Silverstone being Hamilton's home ground, it goes without saying that Verstappen is by no means in the clear. If Hamilton goes on to win the race, with Verstappen having to retire for some reason or another, the British driver will be right next to him once more when it comes to the driving standards. So Red Bull and Mercedes fans will have to hold their breaths to see who comes out on top. We also need to mention that Hamilton went on to post that he isn't giving up on the championship fight just yet, and will be coming back even harder when the British Grand Prix comes along. Number 5, that last lap crash. And when we thought everything was over, something ended up happening on the final lap of the Austrian Grand Prix that took everyone by surprise. After qualifying 8th on the grid, but being moved back 3 spots for impeding Fernando Alonso during quarter 2, former champion Sebastian Vettel was considerably not having the greatest of Formula 1 weekends. But after some luck brought on by a safety car, he finally found himself in the 8th position once more. Unfortunately for him though, his 2-stop strategy ended up relegating himself back to the 14th place, where he spent some time trying to catch both George Russell and Kimi Raikkonen. In the end, there was a pretty intense battle between Vettel and Raikkonen, who are both former world champions, mind you. It felt like a real blast from the past, but ended abruptly when Vettel and the Finnish driver collided on the final lap as they went side by side exiting turn 5. Raikkonen bore the brunt of the crash though, spreading sideways into the gravel and out of the race. And with the stewards deeming him to be one responsible for the crash, having previously closed the door on Vettel, he was given a 20-second penalty. Considering how he didn't finish the race though, this didn't really matter much. When discussing the crash in the post-race interview, Vettel mentioned that he and Raikkonen actually got on very well with one another, but the incident must have been a result of poor communication. He has also stressed that Raikkonen was never actually in the race for points throughout the Austrian Grand Prix anyway, so nothing ventured, nothing gained. He also went on to admit that the car had performed perfectly. He was just a bit unlucky on the day. But what did you think of the drivers' performances? Be sure to let us know in the comment section down below.